Welcome to Socializing Security, where every week we have a discussion about security, compliance, and beyond.
Our goal is to learn and grow by socializing each week's topic with each other, our guests, and with you.
A quick compliance note, this podcast is meant for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal or regulatory advice.
We're glad you've joined us, and we hope you'll learn along with us. Welcome back to Socializing Security. We are here to have another great conversation in the space of security, looking at it from a little bit different point of view than most people probably do. So I'm really excited for this week's topic. But before we get into that, want to reintroduce everyone to Milu and welcome her to this next episode. Hey, Milu.
Hey, Brian. How are you doing? Happy to be here. Really looking forward to who we're speaking to this week and looking forward to the conversation that we're about to have.
Yeah. So this week's guest is going to be Eric Wright. For those that have known me for many years, you probably also know Eric for many years. The two of us both kind of grew up in the virtualization space, and one of his special interests, I would say, is kind of the psychology of marketing and speaking to people and just kind of understanding how people think and how that works to our advantage when we need to communicate to them. And so we're going to have him on this week to kind of talk about that, how it's applied to his career in marketing, how it's driven him in different content types and how he develops messages to go out to the market, which of course is an area true to my heart as well, because it's an area I've been playing in a lot lately too. And while I'm not as much into the psychology side of things and therefore looking forward to hearing what he has to say about it, learning more from him on that, but also having that opportunity to bring my expertise, my experiences into the within the marketing space to that conversation.
Yeah, what I'm excited about chatting with Eric about is not only his background, but also just like his entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, he has his own company as well as his own podcast. And I think you and I have definitely learned a thing or two from his experience and his background. He's also just so forthcoming with trying to help others out, which is like such a wonderful attribute to have. And also, I just feel like kind of rare these days with somebody who's truly just willing to like offer their guidance and input and help and feedback. And I think his personality is just like so wonderful. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about his actual like deep dive background within the space and also just like what he's working on in his professional career as well.
Yeah. So a little background on Eric. Like I said, I've known him for years. We both spent a lot of time in the VMware virtualization community, coming up from the very early days of that, well into the cloud space. He spent some time at a startup for quite a while, actually, and gave him a great insight as to how to build a company, how to grow it, how to get the message out when it's a new kind of space. He went through a successful acquisition in that, and then later decided to go out on his own and start his own kind of content marketing firm, where he has a really cool business model around it, where he can actually bring in kind of independent contractors to help write content. He then goes and contracts with companies to help them define their messaging, to define their content strategy, and then uses these independent writers to bring in actual expertise from the field. So he likes to focus on people who are actually out there doing the day-to-day architecting, administration, engineering within their companies, and using that kind of, I know how I would use it in my environment type of a mindset. I think both he and I come from a customer background way back in the day. So we've always kind of had that in our minds, especially as we go into marketing and think about how do we speak to the me of the past, when I was the one helping to make these decisions, when I was the one that would then have to consume this product, and using that as a way to develop content that really speaks more to those people in the trenches, if you will, day to day, and being able to give them what they need in order to understand what that product is. And so through this trajectory, like you said, he has created a few other of his own little side businesses. Some of them are interesting stories in and of themselves, and I won't take that away from him. you and I did record a podcast episode for his podcast as well, where we did talk about some of that in a bit more depth as well. So we'll probably touch on it here too, but I would definitely encourage everyone to look up Disco Posse Podcast. It's pretty much spelled like it sounds, but Disco Posse is one single word, and go back in his archives and you'll be able to find the story behind that. And it's an interesting story there too. That goes into the psychology of marketing and creating something that is unique, memorable, and something that's going to stick with people. Is wow, that just stuck in my brain. I don't know why, but using that psychology, he was able to come up with kind of his own personal branding around that.
Well, I'm super excited about the conversation. I think there's a lot that you and I definitely want to ask Eric and listen listen to him just like talk about. I think obviously I'm very much looking forward to the conversation. I'm curious to see kind of where it goes. I know we have kind of things that we're hoping we'll get out of the conversation, but I do anticipate this one will just be a little bit more of, we'll see how it goes, because he is such a like sociable and approachable person that it's just like really easy to just like listen to what he has to say and just kind of follow along.
Yeah, definitely. So we hope you all will enjoy socializing with Eric with us. As always, we're looking to learn something and hope that you'll learn along with us. So let's go ahead and bring Eric on.
Awesome.
And welcome back to Socializing Security. We're here to have a great conversation with another great guest. We're hoping to socialize security and to, well, maybe not socialize security. We got to be careful about saying it that way, I guess. But socializing about security and adjacent topics, as well as to have great conversations that we can learn from along with all of you in the audience. So, Milu, welcome back.
Yeah, happy to be back. Really looking forward to our conversation today with Eric. I'm really excited about what we're going to talk about, and just looking forward to also just like listening as we're also recording and learning alongside you both.
Yeah. So let's introduce Eric. I earlier already kind of gave a rundown of my history with Eric over many years now, and kind of where he's come from. But Eric Wright, welcome to Socializing Security.
Thank you so much. And pardon me, I have an animal entering the frame there. Oh, perfect timing.
Yes, so yeah, naturally.
This is awesome. Well, thank you both, Brian and Milu. My name is Eric Wright. I'm otherwise known as @Disco Posse, the easiest way to find me. I'm the Chief Content Officer at GTM Delta, a company I co-founded now literally 2 years ago. So it's hard to believe time flies when you're having fun, and it flies even faster when you're a startup founder and you're just basically hanging on to the wing of the plane, hoping that you don't slide off into the engine. But yeah, this is great. Really, it's been fun because you and I, Brian, have a lot of background through different technology communities that were sort of vendor related and then not vendor related. So I love that we've been able to bump into each other in different circles. And Milu, of course, coming in, having this Venn diagram where now you have so much of what you do now that really digs into the background of what I did as a practitioner in financial services space. So it's a blessing to be able to cover both business and tech, and really then even more importantly, the people in the middle and the science of breaking brains through the magic of words.
Yeah. And that's of course the topic for today, is to really talk about kind of the science behind how people think, how you can use psychology to help people understand through marketing and through education. I think all three of us kind of have a passion, and it's maybe becoming a little bit of a trend on this show about how important being able to mentor people and having mentors to help bring you up and understand concepts faster. So I know those are all areas that you have a lot of interest in. So maybe we can start off with, just give us a little bit of your background of thinking about psychology of people and how people think and how important it is to understand the way the human brain works in order to communicate with people better.
Yeah, it's a great question. And with AI being the hotness nowadays, and everybody's talking about LLMs, and really when you dig into how they work, it's based on the fundamentals of science of, neural networks, and we're imitating, or trying to imitate actual, neural networks in now computing form. And it's an interesting experiment because it's forced a lot of us to look at, why do LLMs behave a particular way? And then it kind of resurged what I've been working on for a long time, which is, people always ask me, like, how do you know technology well? What would you say is the best, sort of guide that led you towards technology? And it should be, the pragmatic programmer, or, something like that. But I say it's DSM-4, figuring out how people break and understanding behavioral psychology. And truthfully, a lot of the stuff that I did around just researching that, attending a university, I may or may not have been paying for the university, but like that'll teach them to leave the doors open. But being able to sit in with really intelligent folks and diving into how people behave and react to certain situations. And that became a real passion of mine. Early on in life, I was in retail. So I worked in retail for quite a while. And I was a shoe repairman, a cobbler, actually. So it's kind of an odd type of retail. And it really was an interesting thing, that learning how to manage upselling and little things like just how you operate a store. And the funny thing was that my store won a marketing award like a marketing and merchandising award for the mall. Like, I'm just an idiot, landscaper and shoe repairman who this is what I think would entice people to come in here. And I can drive people towards certain behaviors in how they flow through the store, put certain things at the cash register. So I really started to actually work backwards and say, well, if this works, why? And that led me to a lot of reading. And, I would say the most seminal work that I would recommend anybody should read is Thinking Fast and Slow. And it's about Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Really, really, and we only just recently lost Daniel Kahneman. Amos passed away many years ago. But the study they did around what would become known as behavioral economics. And that was because economics makes sense. It's numbers, facts. Facts are peculiar and funny things. Facts don't have feelings. Well, that's fine. So you throw numbers at people, but somehow we derive a lot of feelings from how we interpret the numbers. So their study around behavioral economics said, well, mathematically and statistically, this is what the decision they should make. But then they found people moving counter to it. So when they did experiments at scale, then they started to observe behavioral patterns that went against science, what we believe would be right. And this became, the foundation of behavioral economics. The funny thing is, behavioral psychologists won the economics Nobel Peace Prize. So it was the beginning of something fantastic. And we see more if you look at BJ Fogg and some of the work with persuasive computing, which really cool. Also, the reason why we have infinite scroll and we're trying to get our kids off of our phones right now. But that for me was a passion of just seeing how people behaved and really wanting to find out why, so that I could explain it to myself. Because I would even look at my own behavior. I'm like, why do I react certain ways when put under pressure? And could I have a mitigation so that I could detect it before it happens? And so I could try to stop unconscious reactions. You can't, but you can at least try to help them. And it's good for poker playing and stuff like that. So anyways, that was my passion. I'm a real people nerd. So I'm the person that, when I'm doing this stuff, usually the one that is kind of crowd gathering. But otherwise, the moment that I'm done and I'm off stage or off microphone, in-ear monitors, can't hear a bloody thing, and I'm just watching the world go by and just watching patterns and behaviors. It's fun.
I love how you said that you're a people nerd, because I think I've definitely been self-proclaimed as a compliance nerd, and I'm sure Brian also has other things that he would definitely attribute to himself as being like a nerd or subject matter expert. So I think is maybe the better way to say that. When you're thinking about how you took your background in psychology and really started bringing that into the technical marketing space, can you really elaborate on that as to why that was such a differentiator for you? Obviously, your background being super observant and maybe understanding more of the behavioral reactions sounds like a big cue up into that. But how did you find such success in that space with your background?
I'll say it was getting close to other people who were successful in sales And that was one of the fundamental things. I dread sales. I used to say, I don't sell things. I'm not in sales. I don't stand next to people while they sell things. Like I worked in a tech, marketing role as an evangelist, and I would be with sales teams on customer calls all the time. But in a way, for me, to kind of tap the psychology of it, it was a way to put people at ease, that I was not there with a purpose of taking something from them. I was there only to give. And this idea of reciprocation. And that was one of the things that always stood out to me, is like, why do people give? And I like to give. It makes me feel good. It gives me a good feeling. I feel that when somebody says thank you, it's like, oh, that was neat. Not just thank you because they said thank you, but you actually genuinely brought them closer to something. And when you talked about mentoring at the start, Brian, this is kind of what got me into a lot of mentoring, and I was looking for other mentors. So when I got my first job, I was just like, in technology, for me to explain technology to people that don't care about technology. I worked at a financial services firm in the 90s. I'm old like dirt. So I would be showing people that they've never seen a terminal before, like anything other than a terminal. They've seen literally like green screen. You ask them what a key is and they say it's a PF1. There's a bunch of people that are like laughing right now. PF1 key, haha, that, like, they're old like me. But to most of the new school, it was like, well, why aren't we using Microsoft Active Directory? Why aren't we using this? And meanwhile, I was bridging old technology and new practices. And I had to like find a way to connect those things and explain technology to people in a way that didn't make that, like, they just had no background to it. So that the explaining and the teaching side became how I learned, how can I teach better? Because that's the biggest thing. If you explain something and they don't get it, then you're like, oh, you're frustrated. Like, now, is it me? Is it them? And I was always just sort of like a raccoon reaching into a tree for a shiny object. I would never let go. I'm like, I've got to be able to convey this concept. And then forcing me to change the way that I emote the story. And I describe it that way very differently. It's not about telling something or saying something, but emotionally conveying a concept so that it mattered to them. And that's really what it is. It's like, I hate this new system. I know it's really hard. Windows is wild. But let me tell you, you only need this one. Just if you double click that thing, that's all you're going to have to do all day. And they'd be scared to death of computers. And then all of a sudden they're like, whew, okay, yeah, she made me feel okay. I think I can do this. And that was like, can I entice someone towards something that will make them better by getting them past a barrier that is, whether it's self-imposed or even just, knowledge imposed. That was my foray. Then the technical marketing came way later as I started doing blogging, and again, like having to write for myself as a way to explain, because I'd have to slow down. I talk way too fast most of the time. So what I have to do when I have to slow down and explain, when I do video or when I would write, like the physical act of writing, that's why people say journaling, you should actually use a pen and pencil or pen, like, because you mechanically cannot keep up with your thoughts. I can type 80 words a minute. I cannot write that fast. So by forcing myself to the speed of handwriting, it actually really changes the way that I cognitively work my way through what I'm doing. And it gives you more focus, it gives you more clarity, and it makes you pause more, like, is this the right thing I should say? And it was just, I started to see these things in myself, and I thought everybody did. I guess I was just the weird kid. So and it worked out well. Like, I've been blessed by being able to make a career out of it. And Brian, we'll talk about this later, but really it was doing it for good. Because the other thing I would find, I say, like, the only way you know how somebody works is if you know how they break. I never want to push someone to that point, but I want to know what would get them there so that I can know how to get them back. And that was my goal, right?
Yeah, sometimes you gotta push them to the edge so that they can see the landscape that's over there, but in a safe way that you can then pull them back and be like, hey, there's a bridge over here. You can go take this bridge instead and get to that side. And I know that's one thing that we've always connected on, is that ability to say, there's a lot of fear mongering in the space. especially once we start talking about security and compliance and stuff. It's all about, oh my gosh, you're gonna lose all your data. You got to do this so that you don't lose all your data. And look at how many threats there are out there, and how many, everybody's getting pwned. And I hate relying on that messaging, and I will limit that in any presentation I give, no matter how long it is, to 2 or 3 slides at most. And I will try to blaze through them as quick as possible, because yes, I need to set the tone of this environment that we're in and why this solution or this product, whatever message I'm trying to get across, needs to exist. But and sometimes I will literally put in a slide that's like, okay, enough with the fear mongering. Let's move on to something tangible, something that we can move forward with, instead of being scared of what's under the bed. Like, let's shine a light under this bed and realize there's solutions here, and then move into the education. Okay, so given the fact that all these things are happening, here's what we need to do about it. And then, ideally my product pitch is the last 2 or 3 slides. And it's about showing people that, hey, there's solutions in this space. And I tend to be the type to be like, let's try and boil the ocean. I fight with this one all the time, because I want to be like, okay, so security is very wide and it's got all these different things. Like, literally there's a video we're working on right now that I say, let's show the entire security space and all of the different sub-genres and sub-genres that there are of there, and then zoom into just our space, just to show we're not going to try and solve everything, because nobody can. There's just too much going on here. And so to turn this back to you around how, people should understand the space and understand the kind of messaging that people like you and I put together and put out there. How can they dissect the messages that they hear? How can they turn that psychology back on us to make sure we're not trying to manipulate them, so that we're not out there trying to force them to, think they have a problem that they don't really have, when really what we're trying to do is open their eyes to see if they do have that problem that sometimes stays a little bit obscure.
Yeah, and I'm with you that we ran into both a problem of messaging just absolute catastrophe as sort of a method to do it. And at some point, the problem is that it becomes a sky is falling chicken problem, right? That you begin to just take away the strength of a real problem that's going on. And also, of course, when you walk in organizations, you realize just how disconnected people are, like just going through their day to day. And so we as vendors have this responsibility to make it what we do important to as many people in that organization as possible. And because we do want to genuinely help them, it's always got to be in service of helping the customer. Obviously, I say obviously, that's not obvious. Like, some people are just there to, great quote I heard from somebody who says, I spent the last 5 years selling software that doesn't work to people that don't need it, with money they don't have, for a problem that they won't even discover for long after I'm gone from this company. And
that's so sad.
It's really wild that you can manage people towards that outcome. But in the end, he says this, he goes, but what did we actually do? Well, we did get these successes. We did get these things, and it helps to drive the product. So especially when you're a brand new company that has a newer product going to market in a crowded, noisy market where you don't necessarily have a solution yet, because you're looking for somebody to help you develop the solution. You got the idea. How do you actually get someone to trust you? Yes, the old trusted advisor, the fake thing that everybody says they want to be, that nobody actually is. It's, as Penn Jillette says, never let the guy that tells you about the timeshare help you with the math. Because if he's going to tell you the math works, then obviously it's because he's got the pen in his hand on the contract that he's going to win. So you have to be able to say, like, can I, as a vendor or as a marketer, show somebody that I'm so in love with the problem that they've got, that they go, these people care so hard about this problem that they're going to pretty much do anything to try and solve it. And it so happens they've got a software method by which to do it, or a hardware method by which to do this. So it becomes a matter of, like, how do we just love the problem, and then from there say, okay, tell me about what you need to do. And so as an outbound vendor, I want to say, I love this problem and I'm curious, like, how do you deal with this today? versus what most marketers do, and especially salespeople, is the first thing they do is the doom slide. 2,000 breaches have happened in the time I've been standing here in front of you already, and 48,000 will have happened by the time I finish this presentation. Yeah, it's like, what? Like, it sounds bold, it's fun, it's kind of neat that you can do that, but in the end, it's like, it's that in service of the customer and the outcome. Because everything we do in marketing should be so that you can X. And that X has nothing to do with our product. That's a business outcome. And being able to connect a technology problem to a potential technology solution, then a value for that solution. And the value can't be you're going to die or you're going to buy my software. And that's why that marketing doesn't work, because again, it pushes people back. It really makes them standoffish. That's why I don't ask questions when you get into a call. Sorry, I'm the worst guest ever, because I'm just going to give you the whole book in one go here. I did a book.
At least you're not trying to sell a book.
Yeah, I give it away. We'll give you the book to just share with anybody they want. It's called The 4-Step Guide to Delivering Extraordinary Software Demos. And it's just simple techniques of, like, when you get on the call, don't begin with, so what are we looking at as far as timing and availability? Have you got budget for what we're about to do? And you're like, hey, maybe you should ask what problem we've got. That would be super. Or meet the team and listen to, what the problems are, and listen to signals that come up when you describe things. And that's the most important thing. That's why if you describe it as doom, that people shut down. It's a trauma response, effectively, because they just see this big thing and it's like, oh, if there's nothing I can do about it, it's like, then they really just get lost in the bigness of it. And that's why you can't say, like, this is $1 billion problem. Most people do not understand what $1 billion means. But if you say, like, today, you could lose $100,000 at the end of this day, today, that's a meaningful, measurable amount that is tangible to them. All right, now we're in closer numbers. So then you say, okay, but look, I don't want to scare you. I'm just saying that, what's the real problem? How do you deal with this problem today if somebody gets into your environment? And they're like, oh, well, what do you mean? Like, we've got a firewall. I'm like, oh, okay, well, assume breach, right? Assume USB key, assume something's occurred, and for no reason, it just happened. It can happen for 1,000 reasons. Now what? And at that point, you're like softening the attack, but now you're giving them a chance to think freely about a solution without having bombarded them with, like, a cannon is going to drive up to your house and blow your door open. That's the way that we market things.
Yeah, I think this mindset is interesting as well when we think about on the compliance side of the house too, because I think there's so much related to when compliance professionals are also trying to get buy-in in the same way that I think salespeople are trying to, like, deliver value and close deals, of thinking about what's the worst case scenario, right? Unfortunately, for a lot of compliance departments, they struggle with the fact that to get buy-in, especially to spend money on compliance, which is like a back office thing, right? They have to be like, in the worst case scenario, right? Like, it's going to cost the company this. It really is that. In an ideal world, right, you would have companies that are buying into things because they should, and it's the right thing to do. And they should go beyond checking the box. And unfortunately, that mindset, I think, is very similar, not only in the cybersecurity space, but also in the broader compliance space, of how these team members are doing the psychology behind getting buy-in, whether that's internal or external, for more tooling, more resources, or new audits to better secure the posture, is on that same side of being like, this is the worst case scenario.
Yeah, and that's a great example of, if you look at, like, the Unified Compliance Framework, it's a 14,000 line spreadsheet that has, like, 9 frameworks in it. Really cool. Scary as hell, right? Like, the first thing I think is 14,000 lines in a spreadsheet. I don't even want to fill out a 20-line spreadsheet for a vendor questionnaire. How in goodness name can I expect to do this? And then to find out that some of them are common and some of them are individual, and stuff like HIPAA. It's, not just about the GRC thing is a problem. There's governance, there's risk, and compliance. There are 3 pillars, and we really, as humans, especially not compliance professionals like you, Milou, who, like, all 3, where the pillars are and where the walls are, we really are like, we treat everything as like we're going to get in trouble. Like, well, that's compliance. Governance is the ways, the policies by which you define methods. A risk is the negative side effect if you do not map those methods and enact them. Compliance is when someone goes, hey, did you do that thing? And you go, no, we didn't do that thing. They're like, ooh, yeah, there's going to be a little fine coming your way for that one, or whatever it is. And the biggest thing for compliance is like non-compliance as a punishment of like, it's a risk to the business, to the organization, to your reputation. It's a financial risk. But again, if we approach it as this, do you want to be like X bank that was in the news yesterday because they were breached? And you're like, it's a very emotive thing to incite a reaction. But again, it's just so big that like this person that works at this company, they're an InfoSec professional. They just want to get through their day. They are concerned about the practices they perform every day, but they're not really concerned about a PR going out at 4 a.m. because they had a breach. Like they know they're going to lose their job. That's what they're really learning. So the human side of it is, hey, how do I make sure that you are safe from your company's risk? And then as an InfoSec professional or a compliance professional, I'm protecting you from your company. But at the same time, I'm protecting your company from problems. And then you've really put it in their camp of like, I'm going to be better because I'm going to ensure that like we're doing our part, like whatever, like everybody's doing their part. And now you've made them the and now that's the center of the story, not the breach, the financial problem, the outages, the ransomware, the alarm. It is, if you play a klaxon alarm for 3 minutes, people will not leave their desk. And at that point, they're like, it's probably just a mistake, and they just get used to it. And that's the danger of over-marketing turmoil as the end result. What we should be marketing is the success and the heroes that we create while reducing or eliminating risk and while achieving other business outcomes so that you're spending more time doing innovation instead of going through your UCF spreadsheet, filling out 14,000 lines. God bless the fine folks at UCF. I don't mean to pick on them, but
nope. I love that pivot into like people have saved their company because of the thing that I have to sell you, and every individual within an organization should want to be a part of that. Like we all want to be the hero of our own story. We all think we're the hero of our own story, and so you have this drive to prove it. And by showing that, and this is to me a big part of, I've been involved with customer marketing and being able to create a community amongst customers. And that naturally then helps to surface some of these types of stories. It helps people to become more bought into the solution that they acquired from us as a company, and then I don't want to say use them, that sounds bad, but to provide opportunities for prospects to talk to these customers that have had real demonstrable outcomes, to hear, we bought the software and it works. Cool. It works. It does what they say to do. That's great. Like that can help a sales motion. But if I think back to my days as being on the customer side, when I would talk to another customer of something I was looking at buying, and they were like, yeah, I mean, we had this incident and using this tool, I didn't think it could do this, but then I played with it in this way, and I was able to actually provide the information the company needed in order to undo this bad situation that happened very quickly. That's the kind of thing I want to hear, because it's like, okay, cool. I know it can do that thing. I'm going to put it in that way so that I don't have to spend hours troubleshooting and trying to figure out what happened. I can go click that button over in that product, and now all of a sudden I've become a proponent. I've become that person that I now know, being on the other side. The salesperson is always looking for that. Who's that technical evangelist within the company? Who's the person that wants to promote me within the walls, and therefore, give me a inside track to it. And so having that, so from a sales perspective, and you stated the fact that you didn't like being associated with sales, but I know
At
this point in your career, everybody's in sales. ABC.
I am very directly in sales right now. It's
yes.
unavoidable. But
you wear every hat at this point. Yes. But even in marketing, where we're just developing content to shove out to the sales team to use, well, we're having to sell it within those means, within those videos, within those interviews that we do. We are selling at every stage of the game. How we've talked a lot about the psychology within marketing. Maybe real quick as we get kind of to the end here, talk about the sales aspect of it, maybe from both sides. Like as I'm sitting in a room and I'm on the sales side trying to convince this prospect of something that I want them to glom onto. And it may not be that my product is the thing. It may be that, hey, the problem is the thing. And then maybe even, kind of give the other side of that table too, if you can.
Yeah, I'll say just even the interactions, classic thing. And I know you don't mean to do this, and I know you actually don't do this on a regular. We're talking sales language. So it's funny, even when I hear the prospect, every time I hear the word prospect, my grandfather was a prospector, an actual gold digging prospector. So it's funny that I always thought of it that way. And here all of a sudden I move into sales, and I remembered watching a salesperson, fantastic human, fantastic. He was really great. And he talks to me, he says, hey, I was just talking before with a prospect and they had the same problem as you. And I just watched this person just like tighten up, and they're like, oh, okay. And they started to look around, and I was like, that was it. And I told him, I said, like, I know it's a weird thing because we use it across the board as language, but even just say like another person from the tech community, or another potential customer. And it's so funny that even just like that labeling can really box somebody in, where it's like, and you talk to somebody like, well, we'll sell it, you're going to be the one that's using it, but we got to get approval from your boss. And it's like, you've then put them in an adversarial relationship with their manager. And you're now like, there's really odd things about how we do this. So I love to think of it. The best thing is reciprocation. I hate that I know why it works, and I hate that there's psychology behind it, because I genuinely love to give stuff away. My whole purpose in life is to give away everything I can and somehow fund the ability to do so. Really hard to do. But at any rate, when they offer more as a salesperson, that's why you give access for a while, and you give them access to the SEs, you give them access to an engineer, you listen to them, you make sure that you send them things, right? You hear their kids love golf, you send them a bunch of golf balls with your logo on it, whatever it's going to be. So you genuinely do stuff, but it is to nudge them towards reciprocation. So they've now received something from you and they feel they owe this. It happens in conversation. So that's why I never say what storage providers are using right now. What's your cloud? Which cloud providers are using? What are you using for security tools? So you would say, hey, I remember this. I ran a pretty diverse environment, a couple of clouds, lots of storage. What storage are you using, if you don't mind me asking? Very different way in which how you approach that discussion versus like, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition, and you're just getting lambasted with these questions, and they become defensive. And then there's urgency, another classic sales tactic. Well, I'll tell you what, it's the end of quarter. If we lock this in on Monday, I can get you a deal. It's the old vacuum salesperson, right? Like, let me just see if I can get. No, Joe, they can't do it. We can really give them 30% off. Wow. Joe, I really appreciate it. These people are great. It's worth it. Trust me. I knew it was going to be. And like, there's none of that thing. And was it Fargo where they did that? He walks into the office. He's like, I'll go talk to my manager and see if I can get a deal on this True Coat. And he goes in and he's like, hey, Pete, what are you doing on the weekend? Not much. Going to hang out with the kids. He goes, right on. He comes back. He goes, well, I got you the True Coat, but it's going to be $100.
Yeah.
There's the fakery that goes on. I don't mind that some of those things happen. Like, we do have end of the quarter things. We do have these things that are urgency, but don't create false urgency. Don't make it artificial and the fault of the person on the other side of this transaction. Again, how do we make them a hero? And so as a salesperson, I even think of this when I meet somebody for the first time. I hate that there's science behind it, but it does work. Say hi right away. Hey, how's it going? What's new? How are things since last time, right? When you meet somebody for the first time, and especially when they're a referral, like, oh, Milu, how do you know Brian? How did you guys meet? I'm curious, right? And even small little things, just like couch it with, like, if you don't mind me asking, I'm curious. I'm Canadian, so I do this by nature. I just didn't realize that it was actually a technique for helping to manage people's belief in, trust and sharing. And that's really what it is. If I look at the counter side of it, we can use it for ill. Like, I could use a lot of these, I could use every one of these techniques to drive towards something that is not in favor of the customer. So there's a moral, ethical bind that everybody has to dance at. And most people are that way. And I genuinely, there are people, but that's why it bothers me when I see somebody marketing like, hey, let's just say a major virtualization provider was purchased by a major networking provider, which is basically a PE firm. And suddenly a lot of other people that are similarly in the virtualization space say, hey, is this decision driving you to drink? Come on by and my booth will give you a free, bottle of whiskey, and we'll talk about solutions to get away from your problem. It's like, well, first of all, so many things wrong with that. But mainly is the fact that you've introduced an adversarial relationship to their existing product. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing, like, when I'm selling this to them, show them what they're doing and get it in there. Even when you show them a UI, say that here's your environment. Don't say, this is our dashboard. No, here's your environment. You've got a cluster, you've got a virtualization, stack, you've got a couple of nodes here, you've got a Kubernetes environment. There we go. And we do this. And so it's them feeling themselves in that situation. And then you say, how do you do this today? If you don't mind me asking. And then that's the chance. So rather than say, like, you can't do it without us. We all love that. Every vendor, every startup founder believes they're creating a market. Good luck, and may your God go with you, because everybody thinks that. And it's expensive as heck. And really, there's a lot of noise out there. So how do we differentiate with honor and integrity? And I think that's kind of what we're talking about, is get them to use it, understand why they use it, understand how it makes their life better and how it achieves a business outcome. And then marketing around that should be backing into it. That's what it should be. It's like, it has to be based on the solution and the outcome, but it's very easy. It's just so tempting to say, like, big scary things, fire. Hey, did you see in the news? You don't want to be the next, you don't want to be the next whatever company that just had a breach. Because what if maybe you are in the middle of one of those yourself? Yeah. Very, very dangerous for you to, like, poo-poo, your competitors. And that's another one. Sorry, last one. I know we gotta wrap. Otherwise, I'm going to turn this into a 90-minute podcast. When it comes to dealing with competitive differentiation, simplest thing in the world. And I got taught this by a man named Oved Laurie. Oved's a fantastic sales pro, worked with me at Turbonomic, and he's at IBM. An incredible human as well, just like really giving guy. And people would say, like, we had a direct competitor, like a straight up VMware vSphere operations. So it's like VROPS. That was our baby with the one eyebrow to our Turbonomic. And so a lot of people would say, like, oh, it can't do that. That can't do this. It will fail at this. And that was sort of their technique to describe the competitor. But Oved was so much more intuitive to it. He says, someone say, but I already do this with VROPS, and I don't mean to call out vendor names. People kind of know my background, so it's safe to say this stuff. And he would say, what? Okay, I understand. Like, so what do you love about VROPS? Like, what do you love about that product? And then they would say, oh, it's like, it's integrated in vCenter, and it's there. It looks like everything else, makes sense. It's used in the same context, and no words. Like, just wait. The one thing I wish it had, though, was like better, like, drill downs, and like there's stuff that you have to go to too many screens sometimes. Like, it's reciprocation. They've talked up your competitor without you, like, you're just asking an honest answer. What do you love about that? Because you can learn from it. Like, oh, when you go to your product team, say they love the menus, then let's make our menus better, right? So, anyways, that is my. There's so many layers where integrity can come through. Not that I believe that people have ill intent when they're using some of the darker techniques, like pushing people towards quarter end and stuff like that. But I know, I just, maybe that's why I don't drive a Porsche, because I'm not a good salesperson.
Well, Eric, I
Great.
mean, I think the human element of everything that you've just gone through is just like so important to everything that we've been talking about today. I think just understanding why we are doing the things that we're doing and making it clearer from like an audience perspective, especially if they're in marketing or sales, or even in a supporting role that is just maybe dealing with more salespeople when they're trying to just like procure certain tools they need, I think is really, really valuable. So thank you so much for going into that in such detail. And then I'm going to pivot, and I think this one isn't super surprising to you because I know we spoke about this in Disco Posse as well on your podcast, but I do like the cohesivity of making sure that we're kind of wrapping up all of our engagements talking about the same thing, especially with your background in marketing. Obviously, I think we've talked about this before, but figuring out, I had a CTO recently say that the fight for privacy is dead. And now that it's really the fight for security. Is that something you inherently would agree with, or is something that in your perspective, you're like, no, there is still value in privacy? What are your thoughts on that?
Privacy is, in my opinion, a fundamental human right. And I would build products that ensure that that is respected. The protection of privacy does not mean that it's the way you manage data. You may have to collect information, you may have to hold, but there are ways in which you can think towards privacy and like always bias towards privacy, bias towards protection, bias towards resiliency, build anti-fragile systems that are self-managing. That's the real goal. The path to get there is a long one, and along the way you do a lot of cool things and you get a little closer with each step. And when we get to privacy, the one thing that obviously in very recent news was things around Microsoft recall. Again, I don't mean to pick them as a vendor, but as an example of letting something go out the door as an idea and then having people test it. And then immediately it's like, did anyone in marketing talk to a human that's going to use this product, or anybody in security? So I don't think we needed to be the point of where I have to have a Mr. Bean routine to like take my hard drive and unplug it from my laptop, put it in a drawer, and then lock that into a room, and then put that behind a fire extinguisher with a mousetrap. I don't need to do this crazy, ultra overprotected, but simple things of, can we make sure that we manage data in a way that respects privacy? And when it is being used and it has to be pulled in, let's be transparent about how we use that data. And as we see more and more around, especially with compliance frameworks, where we talk about what it used to be called vendor relationship, now it's called third party, whatever the acronym is, because there's not enough.
The new phrase.
Yeah. But third party relationship management and third party, environment management. It's not just us, but my payment providers, my storage providers, my cloud providers. So when we look at privacy, we have to make demands of our vendors that ask them the question, quite honestly, how are you doing this? And that's why people are SOC 2 is like kind of the big thing, was an early startup. You have to have certain provisions in place. That doesn't mean you're protected. You want to say, like, how do you use this data? I'm doing a presentation tomorrow as we're recording. Of course, it'll happen by the time this goes live, about using AI tools for VMware vSphere operations. And it's biased towards privacy. It's all 100% local models that are using local tooling so that it maintains your data protection. Because even though the terms and conditions, again, OpenAI, great friends of mine, love the stuff they're doing, and I pay for it. So it says, well, we don't use this to train the model. But you do store my data for 30 days. And a lot can happen in 30 days, including the change of those terms and conditions that we just check because we want to get back into the product. Scroll, check. There's no greater lie than this. You may feel a little pressure, and I agree to the terms and conditions.
Yeah. Well, that's another whole podcast at some point, is the terms and conditions one.
But privacy,
no, Eric,
I'll say like that. And I didn't mean to step on you, Brian, but like,
nope, go ahead.
If I lay it down to one thing, privacy is always a risk, and we have to be mindful of it. We don't have to be, living like the guy in the accountant movie, but we can do small things. And it's really important that we think with a bias towards privacy at home and then at work. And it can be as simple as just, do you have a sticky note on your monitor that has a password on it? Because I have a particularly good camera. And so it's not hard for a little thing to happen where you zoom in and you say like, hey, a 4K camera, you'll be able to read the date on the stamp on my partner's, ticket in the picture. It's wild what you can do. So small things like that, just be careful and think a little extra. But, I wish I had the answer. It's always going to be a risk. It's just a matter of making sure that you're comfortable being aware.
Yep.
Yeah,
It's a risk awareness and tolerance discussion as so many things are. So cool, Eric. Well, we really appreciate you sharing your thoughts. We really hope everybody learned a lot with this conversation, because there's a lot to learn for sure. If people do want to continue to engage with you, to learn more, why don't you share the best places to hear more and to see more and to contact you if necessary?
Well, thank you both. And again, thank you for what you're doing, because this is super important that I love how you're connecting the human side of both, IT practitioner, security, and compliance on the legal and business side. These are the Venn diagrams that need to be put together, so that in the middle of that little circle between all three of us is the listener, and they can take these and take prescriptive actions. That's the one thing I love that we want to be able to do more, is not just be like, oh yeah, AI ethics, it's a thing. Great, let's have another 45-minute fireside chat about the same 3 questions. How do we actually prescriptively solve the problem? So for me, if you want to get prescriptive solutions, or you just want to say hi, head on over to LinkedIn. Eric Wright, also Easy E has that name, so I recommend looking for Disco Posse. Only one of those. Disco Posse podcast as well. I have a podcast, which I've been very lucky to have both of you on. And gtmdelta.com is the place where I live and breathe every day and night. So if you need any help on the content side of the world, I do that thing, and would love to entertain any conversations. But even for peers, just hit me up. Twitter as well, X, whatever we're supposed to call it these days. I'm Disco Posse there, and always open. DMs are open. Love new conversations and new meetings.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Yeah, and I will definitely underline that Eric is always willing for a good conversation. So thank you all for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this. We hope you learned something along with us, and appreciate you socializing security with us. Take care, everybody. So another fantastic conversation, Milu. I really enjoyed it. What did you think?
Yeah, I think it was so great to hear Eric Wright's perspective just on the psychology behind marketing, and also just the thoughts behind, positivity in sales, and bringing it back to a place of understanding as opposed to a place of urgency or fear mongering. I think were things that I'll be thinking about for a while after this.
Yeah, I think that conversation probably went a long way to showing you and others who maybe already know me outside of the podcast why Eric and I have been friends for a number of years. Is we very much think along the same lines when it comes to these types of things about positivity and not making the message too negative. Don't start off with things that are going to shut people down before you even get a chance to talk to them about the thing. Connect with them as humans. These are all things that are super important. And obviously, Eric and I have talked a lot about these types of things over the years. So, there were still things that I learned. I would say the biggest thing for me was, slow down and understand was one phrase he used multiple times that really stuck with me. That thought process of, and I've always known this, like if you write something down, if you journal at night with a notepad and a pen, the things that you write down, you're more likely to remember. I've seen scientific studies around that. He talked about it more in the slow down and understand aspect of it, of you have got to sit down and process through that stuff and actually put it together in words, as opposed to these ambiguous thoughts that get in our head sometimes when we talk to people and hear really cool things and we start making connections. And I have this problem a lot. It's like, oh, that's an amazing connection. And if I don't write it down then in order to solidify it in actual words that I can remember, it remains ambiguous and it starts to fade away. And so that concept of slow down and understand is something that I'm definitely going to take away. So curious if there's anything specific that you learned socializing with Eric that are really going to apply to your life going forward.
Yeah, I think for me, of thinking about the approach of like positivity and when we're thinking about the psychology behind marketing and sales, what's interesting to me, obviously, in like a compliance function where I manage a lot of external audits, there's so much around the culture of compliance, and there's a ton of negativity, right, about audit. Like people hate audits, even though like I love audits, but they're a necessary evil, right? But there's so much to be said about creating a culture of understanding of like why an organization is doing an external audit and is investing in a compliance standard, or like focusing on this as a way to, bolster their security posture, whatever it may be, but doing that from a mindset of we're doing this for a common goal. We're doing this for like to achieve this thing, like spinning it in a positive thing is absolutely part of the culture work that I do within organizations that I work with, of making sure that compliance isn't seen as scary, right? Audit isn't like, oh, it's the end of the world. And I think it was interesting to have that parallel of being like, hey, I'm not somebody who necessarily is as involved in the sales and technical marketing side of the house. I do content creation and stuff, but thinking through the psychology behind the human element of making sure that you're creating the content, whatever that might be, whether that's policies that you're drafting or prepping for an audit or creating like white papers, of thinking through what is the actual like the question that you're trying to solve, and also doing it in a way that's maybe not like really focused in fear mongering, and thinking through how do we actually like go for a common goal and turn this into we're trying to achieve this, and we want the culture to reflect that. And I think that is absolutely what Eric, I'm sure that's what he's doing at GTM as well, of just like making sure that he's creating those stories, but doing it in a way that's very much from an education forward perspective.
Yep. And that's, I love the fact that you called out it's 100% applicable to other means of communication. When you're creating something to communicate something, it's all about communicating, and communication is generally easier when you have a connection. It's always easier to talk to that neighbor that you've got meaningful conversation multiple times over versus one that you never talk to. And if an issue comes up, then it becomes a problem. I've seen that play out in several different ways over the last few weeks within my town, that simply, we talk about it and it's like, man, if those people had been more neighborly, if they had already had a connection before this thing came up that went to the city council, then it wouldn't have been such an unfortunate outcome in the end. It might not have even gotten to that point at that point. So yeah, make connections with humans. We're all humans. We all want to understand why we do the things that we do. And if it, how you communicate that to them is super important. Cool. Well, another fun episode. Definitely, I love this job, man. This is fun, and being able to talk to old friends and new friends is always making this fun. So we hope you enjoyed that as much as we did, and look forward to the next conversation that we have, and go out there and continue to socialize in security.
Yeah, thanks for socializing with us.
Take care, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Socializing Security. We hope you learned a thing or two with us.
If you'd like to continue socializing with us on this topic or have feedback, we'd love to hear from you on LinkedIn or social media. Just search for Socializing Security. Or you can email us at info@socializingsecurity.com.
Until next time, stay social and stay secure.